And show that we'll have conversations with them and include them in, because as I'm bringing together the folks to come up with a Montana solution, I think it's also one where, I'll have cold strip owners there, as well as worker representatives and conservationists and other folks to figure this out. I do think at times, and that might be we need to address climate change. I say that as a father, I say that as an outdoors person. I think that Montanans see that there are differences in our climate. And I think that we need to do it taking not saying the sky is falling, but saying we need to be making concrete steps. And I do think coal will continue to be part of that energy solution, both in its existing form, but in some respects, there's been more technological changes in that phone in the last 5 years than there is how we actually utilize coal to produce energy in the last 50. It's interesting, I went up to, and that's the wonky, there's like the Sask Power Boundary Dam project in Canada. And they took a existing coal-fired power plant, and one of the units they turned into carbon capture and sequestration, so capturing the bad stuff. They have a CO2 stream that's like 90-something% pure that could actually be commercially used. And right now, most of our oil production actually comes from enhanced oil recovery in Montana, where we're shipping up the CO2 from Wyoming to get to here. Now, they did that in Canada, I'd say don't quote me, but 150 megawatt plant cost $1.6 billion. That's a heck of a lot of money. But the CEO said, next time I do it, I know it'll be at least 30% less expensive. And those are investments I don't think we as a nation have necessarily consistently made. When we, on the one hand, there's regulation that said we're going to make our cars more fuel efficient, but then there was a lot of innovation that came along with it. So I gotta believe there's also gonna be innovation as we address climate and any regulations that might exist.
One question I have on that, you talk about you need a Montana solution for that. How do you balance that solution between east and west, where if you're in Missoula, coal strip shutting down affects you very differently than if you live in coal strip? And what are you hearing from people in coal strip?
Well, I think it's right after the final rules came out, was the last time I was in coal strip, and can't remember, I had a beer or a cup of coffee at a restaurant, and we're talking to some folks. Certainly there is concern, and trying to find a path forward is important. I haven't heard the people from coal strip just saying, let's wave the white flag and do nothing. And that both owners and workers recognize the more that we can come up with something on our terms, it may not be perfect. Sage grouse was not perfect by any means, like our state solution for it. But you could also have Audubon Society and the Petroleum Association and stock growers, land trust folks all standing up together and saying, we're all given something, but at least we're in charge of it. This is a long process in some respects. It's the interim advisory council, I think I have reporting out early next year. The first report federally is in September. And it's not even, here's how you'll attain the goals. It's, are you going to do mass-based? Are you going to do rate-based? What's your general approach? Are you going to look just at Montana? Are you going to look at regional possibilities? So I think that there's, for one, look, it is something that is concerning. It's concerning to me. The final rule is disappointing to me, but the sky isn't falling. And let's figure out how to move this forward in a way that's best for our state. And that one, too, I guess, that best for our state to me is in geographic boundaries of Missoula versus Cold Strip.
We had an editorial board meeting with a couple of groups a couple of weeks ago about transmission, renewable energy transmission. And, their sort of point was if the part of getting renewable energy projects off the ground in Montana on a broad scale is gonna mean developing some transmission lines that are gonna be able to take the energy out of state. But cross state boundary transmission lines in our most recent past have been.
Didn't work out too well.
No, they were kind of controversial. But it also, their stance is it's part of the mix of Montana's energy future of we're going to always be an exporter of energy to some degree and more solar, more wind, more renewable energy is going to get those projects off the ground. There's going to have to be markets outside of Montana for some of that power.
I think absolutely right.
So where do you come down? I mean, where do you stand on getting those projects moving forward?
Yeah, now it's not without a degree of challenge because initial rule to final rule, even if we put a bunch of new renewables onto the grid and in the market, that doesn't necessarily meet our targets, right? So stepping aside that this isn't all about clean power plant, but we are an exporter of energy, and we have, some would say, the second best wind in the country, but we're very, very constrained in how we get it out. And I've actually had conversations with Governor Meade in Wyoming as they're building new wind and have a way to figure out how to get it to market. As you noted, the Misty didn't go too well. But it is something that we need to both look at. So are there areas in western Montana that might be on private land that we could tie into BPA lines? Are there different ways to look at transmission following mostly existing right-of-ways? Western Governor Association was 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the things that we actually also talked about on the federal lands. Like, why is it that some folks are, just because it ultimately ends up easier, trying to build this transmission line that gets around federal lands as opposed to doing it in the most sensible way? It's something that transmission we have to figure out as we bring more renewables on. And also, though, as you say, make sure that the markets are there. Make sure that we can do what we can with a state like California, which almost penalizes out-of-state renewable energy, trying to build more of it on their own. We are blessed with an abundance of water, wind, sun, and fossil fuels. The more that there's also, as we have regional discussions and things, that I think that some of that might be, some of those bridges might be able to be gapped, but transmission, I talk about phones and coal-fired generating. Talk about one of the most antiquated systems we have is our overall transmission system. And how to get that updated, it's not without its share challenges. And it's something that I fully think that we should work on, recognizing whatever the pieces are that we can do.
Today, there's been a lot of news about LWCF, the temporary reauthorization.
Did it get into the omnibus?
It's into the omnibus bill for 3 years. I've seen some touting that as a win. Most of the conservation groups are touting it as just kicking the can down the road. We had a congressional delegation that was all on the same page, maybe for the first time in history.
You said it, not me.
Yeah. And I'm sort of curious. I mean, we in conversations we've had about this with Senator Tester and Senator Daines, they've said it makes sense that to get some of this, get legislation approved is going to take a lot more support than just three, guys from Montana. It's going to take regional support, and the LWCF has a lot of impact in the western states. As governor, is there a way the western governors can lean on Congress? I mean, is there a method for you to be able to push for that?
Yeah. So somehow, I shouldn't say somehow. So I'm vice chair of the Western Governor Association right now. Chairman is Matt Meade from Wyoming. For the first time ever, I think, in Western Governor Association history, we went together out to Washington DC and had a Senate hearing, a House hearing, some informal things. And that was one of the areas where we were unified in saying, look, we need the LWCF. It matters significantly to the Western states. We're unified in other areas too, which is great because Western issues are often substantially different. I mean, when I look at, there's an aside, 34 extensions for highway bill, and finally got one, like 3 years is great. It certainly is kicking the can down the road, but the way that the can's been kicked down the road in many areas is something that, well, I'll take the 3 years. Long way to say yes, and Washington governors are unified on that. Another area, going back to Mineral County, Washington governors have been unified on fire watering. We're seeing less and less of the U.S. Forest Service's budget actually be able to be used to plan long-scale projects, and more of it just going to fire, and at the same time you're reducing their overall budget. It's an interesting, like on the one hand, if you get to know Butch Otter and Idaho, he and I may not seem like we'd have a lot in common, but there are a lot of commonalities where I think Western governors are really trying to say, you all collectively, you all in Washington, D.C., need to get beyond sort of the intransigence because it matters on the ground out here.
It's somewhat ironic that the LWCF's biggest problem is Representative Bishop from Utah.
I wouldn't disagree with that, and it is. Now, Governor Herbert wasn't part of that as we talked about the LWCF, but I'm pretty sure that, well, I know that both Governor Meade and I spoke, and we usually didn't speak with a combined voice without resolutions behind us on, like, this is something that needs to get done.
We did some reporting recently on the hair microscopy issue and the problems with the cases out of the medical examiner's office. Obviously, you've got a brand new start with your medical examiner's office in the state, and it seems like you're making some progress on the Eastern Crime Lab, about to get that up and running. So why wouldn't it be good to kind of get a clean slate? And if there were multiple questionable convictions, isn't it the responsibility of this state to take a good look at that? I know that you said you wanted to defer to the Attorney General's position on that, but honestly, it seems like it's sort of part of your brief as well as governor.
Well, I think, the current Attorney General either has the best of the worlds or the worst. Meaning that he has somebody as governor that actually understands what that job is and thinks the world of that job. I love being Attorney
Was
General.
it more fun than
Depends which day. Can't really say no comment on that, but definitely depends which day. So that's when, we need to have faith and confidence in our overall judicial system. And like every system, these are imperfect systems, but it really is one in the DOJ's wheelhouse.
when you got the FBI saying you really ought to take a look at these cases? It seems like that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, and what the FBI did a review of what their overall cases are.
They trained all the state people.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about the state sunshine laws for a minute. That's obviously something that's very important to us in the media. And we've written about it a few times, just the third-party organizations that have pretty consistently ranked Montana among the worst in the nation for sunshine laws. We've had trouble with, I guess some of our concerns would be a lack of deadlines for compliance, a lack of criminal penalties for failing to comply with open records laws, very overused privacy exception, all these things that we consistently run into. Is that a concern for you?
Well, I think that, there are facets of, like if we look at PIRG's rating of government transparency, I think that even by putting our state checkbook on the lines online, which I did in my first week, so you can get that information. I think we went from an F or a D to an A minus.
And it has improved, definitely, yeah.
The most recent rating where Montana got a horrible for overall transparency, then I'll get to your direct question. I mean, look at all the facets that they had in it, and it was like, well, we don't adequately fund our Commissioner of Political Practice Office, as an example. Those are different than sometimes a journalist's interest in how do you get the information. Now, the discussion about, and it wasn't without some challenge of classifying information, you know, my CIO might have been saying the wrong things, but data privacy is so essential, even in what warehouses, what digital warehouses we hold information. I mean, there's a whole bunch of information on this campus that shouldn't be on my computer, or I shouldn't have access, or others. You know, you want to have all the firewalls for personal identifying information. I mean, I would like to, I do think, well, we could always look at, well, timelines and, again, in human systems, how to enhance that. That's certainly a discussion that I think is worth having. I always marvel at what little times I'm in Washington, like at all the National Governors Association meetings where all the governors, Democrats and Republicans, are all in the same room, and the president, vice president speak, and then he says, all right, you're done. And all the journalists are escorted out. I mean, for the challenges that we have in Montana, in some respects, we still have both the Constitution, which fortunately you and others, the collective you being, you know, the fourth estate, and others have enforced, and we do have some of the best laws and constitutional background, I think, in the nation. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't always be striving to improve it.
Can you think of any specific ways that may be needing improvement, or that you might work for improving that?
In the areas of, you mean?
I mean,
I say the areas of because your question was premised on a bad rating that covers so much more than getting information out of the campuses. I mean, it's, no, I think, and I've fought to try to add transparency in, I mean, the Trace Act, carried by Senator Ankeny, is truly one of the most progressive disclosure laws in the country. Progressive because it's a longer period saying if you're going to spend money in our elections, you at least got to report that you've spent it. Is it perfect? No. When it comes to the overall campus, like how to better get information out of government, I'm always open to, here are the challenges. Now, I don't know if criminally penalizing someone if they didn't get all the right documents or anything is the right answer necessarily. I think that this is something that in my office, and not just, you know, I mean, getting the information out based on information requests, can take a heck of a lot of time. And I'm not sure that's always staffed.
It's an interesting law because there's sort of the letter of the law, which it seems, and I don't want to, I'll generalize, knowing that I'm generalizing. It seems like the state agencies want to follow the letter of the law, and as journalists, we want them to follow the spirit of the law. And sometimes those meet up, and sometimes they don't. So an example, it was maybe 2 years ago, or maybe 18 months ago, we asked for all the daycares in Helena. It seemed like they're licensed. It's pretty simple stuff. We wanted their license number, contact information, that sort of thing. And we were denied that request, saying that the license providers would prefer that information remain private. Well, I mean, my take on that is they may prefer it be private, but they're licensed by a state agency. We got it ironed out, but what it took was sort of a FOIA request